Daniel Hart arrived in the small city just after noon, carrying only a weekend bag and a bouquet of white lilies for his mother. The air felt warm and bright, and the wind pushed gentle shadows across the parking lot of the rental car center. He dressed simply, in a soft gray jacket and a plain blue shirt. There was nothing flashy about him. He looked like any quiet visitor who wanted to move quickly, do his errand, and return to family. He had one goal: reach the hospital before visiting hours ended. He could have traveled with a full detail, with drivers and radios and a convoy that made other cars slide aside. He had that option every day, and he turned it down whenever he could. He believed leadership was not a stage show. It was the work done when there were no cameras and no crowd. He told only 2 aides where he would be and when he hoped to be back. He felt peace in the choice. He was going home as a son, not as a famous official. The rental lot gave him a modest sedan in a soft silver color. The attendant made small talk about the weather and handed him a folded map, just in case his phone lost signal. Daniel thanked him and pulled out slowly. The drive to the hospital would take 20 minutes on a simple road lined with local shops. He watched the town pass like a photo album: barber shop, bakery, hardware store, church, a small library with a mural on the wall. He loved how normal it looked, like a place that could hold memories safely for years. His phone buzzed once. It was a short, careful message from his chief of staff: "Safe travel. Call if needed." He replied with a brief "all good," then placed the phone screen down in the cup holder. Music played softly from the radio, something gentle without words. He thought of his mother, the way she hummed songs while she cooked, the way she said his name when she was proud, and even the way she scolded him when he forgot to rest. The thought made him smile, and then his smile faded as red and blue lights flashed in his mirror. He slowed and signaled, pulling to the curb near a small diner with a blue awning that read Maple Street Cafe. He took a breath, steady and clear. He checked his speed and mirrors in his head. He had signaled. He had stopped at the last sign. He had stayed inside his lane. He placed both hands at the top of the steering wheel and rolled down the window halfway. A white patrol car stopped behind him, then a second one eased up along the curb behind that, and the 2 officers stepped out. The first officer wore dark sunglasses, though the sidewalk was shaded by trees. The second officer stood slightly back, one hand resting on his belt, eyes moving slowly over the car. The first officer asked for license and registration in a tone that felt heavy and cold. Daniel answered politely and handed over the documents. He asked, calmly, "May I ask why I was stopped, officer?" The first officer said words Daniel had heard before in many places: "You fit a description," but he did not explain a time, a place, a report, or a reason that made sense. Daniel stayed calm. He had learned over a lifetime that calm was not just a choice, it was a tool for safety and clarity. He said, "I understand," and kept his voice low and even. The second officer asked where he was headed and why he was in town. Daniel explained he was going to the hospital to visit his mother. He said her name softly. He said the ward. He offered to call the hospital to confirm. The first officer did not respond to that. He asked instead if Daniel had any weapons. Daniel said no. He asked if the officers would like to confirm that. He added, "I do not consent to a search, but I will follow lawful instructions." Across the street, a delivery driver on a scooter slowed down to watch. The driver, a high school kid named Jordan, parked near the diner door and kept his helmet on. He lifted his phone and began to film from his chest height, keeping quiet. Inside the diner, the owner stepped out to shake crumbs off a tablecloth. She saw the lights. She had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years and had seen how stops like this could go. She pressed her lips together, went back inside, and told her cook to keep an eye on the front. Then she came back out with her phone and stood under the awning. The first officer returned from the patrol car with Daniel's license and a look that suggested more questions. He asked again about Daniel's route and about the car. He suggested the car might be rented under a different name. Daniel explained the rental. He offered the printed agreement from the glove box. He moved slowly, announcing each motion, "I am reaching into the glove box for the agreement." He placed the papers on the window edge so the officer did not have to lean in. The officer flipped the pages and said nothing. The second officer stepped to the passenger side and tapped the window, asking Daniel to roll it down. Daniel did so. The officer asked for his phone. Daniel said, as calmly as he could, "Officer, my phone contains personal information and secure contacts. I do not consent to its search. If there is a specific lawful request, I will follow it." The first officer said, "If you have nothing to hide, you won't mind." Daniel replied, "I mind because rights matter for everyone, including me." His voice did not rise. He did not shrink. He just stood on simple words that carry weight. A third car arrived. The new officer was younger and stood more carefully, as if measuring each step. Her name tag read M. Ortiz. She checked her camera, tapped once at her chest, and a small light glowed to show it was recording. She looked at Daniel, then at the two officers, and then down at the notepad in her hand. She asked, in a respectful tone, "What is the stated reason for the stop?" The first officer gave a short answer that did not include a time, a case number, or any report. Maya Ortiz wrote something and kept her eyes steady. She did not argue. She just made sure her cameras saw and heard everything. The first officer told Daniel to step out of the car. Daniel answered, "I will step out. For the record, I am requesting a supervisor." He placed his phone in his jacket pocket, locked the car, and kept his hands visible. He stood on the curb with the trees above him and the cafe sign at his back. He could smell coffee and something sweet from the diner, and it made the moment feel even more strange, like a quiet song playing during a heavy scene. The delivery driver shifted his weight, phone still up, eyes wide. The second officer asked Daniel to open the trunk. Daniel said, "I do not consent to a search." The officer looked at the first officer. The first officer nodded, and the second officer moved toward the trunk anyway. Daniel repeated, "I do not consent to a search," but he did not resist. He simply stood, calm and upright, and said again, "I request a supervisor." Officer Ortiz looked from the trunk to the first officer and then slowly to the small camera light on her chest. She said softly, "Noted," and wrote the time in her pad. The trunk opened with a beep. Inside were the lilies, a neatly folded jacket, and a small overnight bag with a book on top. The second officer lifted the bag and placed it on the curb, unzipping it and peering inside. He found toiletries, a pair of slippers, and a sweater. He thumbed through the book, a worn paperback with notes in the margins. Daniel stood still, watching without comment. The first officer returned to questions about Daniel's work and income. Daniel answered in general terms, saying he served in public safety. He did not say more. The diner owner stepped closer, keeping to her side of the street. She called out in a clear, steady voice, "Sir, do you need a supervisor? I can call the precinct." Daniel answered, "Thank you, ma'am." "Yes, please ask for a supervisor to come to the scene." The first officer told her to return inside and mind her business. She did not move. She said, "This is my business. This is my street." She dialed, gave the location, and asked for a supervisor to respond. The cook peeked out behind her. Other customers turned their chairs toward the window. The street felt different now, quieter, heavier, more awake. The first officer told Daniel he was being detained for investigation. He did not say what offense. He asked Daniel to place his hands behind his back. Daniel obeyed. He spoke slowly so the words would be clear on any recording, "I do not resist." I ask for clear charges and a supervisor. The metal clicked. He felt the pressure, and then the second officer took his phone from his jacket pocket. Daniel repeated, I do not consent to the search of my phone. The second officer said, we'll take good care of it. He placed it in a small evidence bag, but he did not write a label. Officer Ortiz stepped closer. She asked, in an even tone, would you like me to note the property inventory now? The first officer stared at her for a moment and said, we'll handle it. She stepped back, but she did not shut off her camera. She looked at the delivery driver and gave the smallest nod, a simple human sign that said, keep the lens up. Jordan understood. He steadied his hands. The diner owner did the same. A bus rolled by and slowed slightly as passengers turned toward the lights. Daniel spoke to the cool air more than to anyone in front of him. Policy matters, he said, almost like a prayer. It protects everyone. The first officer guided him to the patrol car. The second officer closed the trunk, returned the overnight bag to its place, and put the lilies in the back seat of Daniel's rental. It was a small kindness wrapped in a larger harm, and Daniel noticed the contrast. He let the moment settle in his memory, building a clear record in his mind each step, each word, each choice. The patrol car door opened. Daniel ducked his head and got in as carefully as he could. He looked once more at the diner, at the blue awning and the phones in the air. He thought of his mother waiting with a nurse on the fourth floor, counting the minutes. He thought of the promise every badge carries. He thought of the young officer whose camera light still shone. Then the door closed with a solid thud, and the sound held for a second like a bell. The engine started. The patrol car pulled into traffic. On Maple Street, the phone stayed up, and the truth began its quiet work. They brought Daniel through a side door that led into a narrow hallway smelling of coffee and floor cleaner. The sounds of the front desk faded behind a heavy door, and the air felt cooler, almost like a basement. A small sign on the wall read Interview Rooms 2, 4. His hands were still cuffed, but the hold was not painful, only firm. He told himself to keep noticing details, the clock above the bulletin board, the camera in the ceiling corner, the clipboard on a hook by the door. Details were anchors. Details were truth. At a metal desk inside a plain room, the first officer sat across from him while the second officer leaned on the wall near the door. The first officer started to ask questions again: where he was going, who he knew in town, why his phone had unusual security settings. Daniel answered in simple, steady words. I am here to visit my mother in the hospital. I request a lawyer. Please state the charges. He kept his voice even and slow, not because he was afraid, but because he understood how records work. Pace matters. Clarity matters. The door opened and a sergeant stepped in. He had a clipboard and a practiced smile. The sergeant's voice was polite at first, almost friendly, like a bank teller explaining a fee. He said there had been confusion during the stop, that maybe Daniel could help clear it up with cooperation. He didn't name an offense, only a feeling. He mentioned paperwork that could get complicated, suspicious phone contents, and time. Then he paused, letting his words float, as if the silence would shape them into something Daniel would accept. Daniel did not fill the silence. He repeated the two sentences that mattered most: I would like a lawyer. Please state the charges. The sergeant's smile thinned. He set the clipboard down and tried a different path. He said he could speak to the district to keep this from becoming a public matter, but only if Daniel was reasonable. Daniel looked at the camera in the corner and then back at the sergeant. Policy exists for all of us, he said. Please follow it. In the squad bay outside, Officer Maya Ortiz signed into the body camera terminal. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. She had watched stops go well, and she had seen stops that demanded care. This one had felt wrong from the first minute. Vague reasons, shifting explanations, a refusal to call a supervisor at the scene. She uploaded her footage to the central server and waited for the green check that meant complete. Then she did something she had learned during training from a careful instructor who spoke in quiet rules. She made a second copy to the internal review inbox with the subject line "Preserve Maple Street, Stop Possible Policy Deviations." She included time, location, unit numbers, and her camera ID. She did not add opinions. She did not accuse anyone. She simply created a trail that could not be easily broken. At the front lobby, the diner owner stood at the counter and asked to speak with a supervisor. The desk officer said the supervisors were busy. She left her name, number, and said she had a video from the street. At the same moment, the teenage delivery driver, Jordan, uploaded a short clip to his social page. He didn't label anyone by name. He wrote, "Weird stop on Maple Street." Guy seemed calm. Anyone know what happened? The clip showed Daniel's hands on the wheel, the words "I request a supervisor," and the glow of a rookie's camera light. Within minutes, neighbors were sharing it, not as a firestorm, but as a question. Back in the room, the sergeant placed an unlabeled evidence bag on the table. Inside was Daniel's phone. He tapped the bag with a finger and said, "You know, sometimes people carry numbers they don't want anyone to see. We can keep this simple if you want to keep things quiet." The second officer, by the door, folded his arms as if to add weight to those words. Daniel felt the old discipline settle into his bones. He kept his breathing slow. "I do not consent to any search of my phone," he said. "I ask for an inventory receipt and a clear, written explanation of why I was stopped." The sergeant sighed, picked up the clipboard, and wrote something down. He left the room with the first officer. The second officer stayed by the door, looking at the ceiling camera as if he wished it were not there. Daniel waited. He looked at the corner where paint had chipped and thought of his mother's laughter in their kitchen when he was a boy. He reminded himself why patience was not weakness here. It was a plan. He needed the room to record itself. He needed procedures to do their quiet work. After several minutes, a different voice came through the intercom beside the door. It was calm, older, and precise. "You are entitled to a phone call," it said. "If you would like to place one now, an officer will dial the number." Daniel nodded. "Yes, please." The door opened, and Officer Ortiz stepped in with a notepad. She had asked to be the one to facilitate the call. Her voice was professional. "You may place your call, sir," she said. He recited a number he knew by heart. It rang twice. His chief of staff answered. Daniel spoke in ordinary words, but each phrase was a key. "I landed safe," he said. "The schedule changed. I will be later to the hospital. Please check on the flowers that were delayed." On the other end of the line, the chief heard the code they had used for rare cases. Schedule changed meant unexpected detention, and flowers meant phones and records. The chief kept his reply just as tidy. "Understood. We will make sure everything is handled with care. Travel safely." They hung up. The call had taken less than 30 seconds. No one in the room would have guessed that those plain words had set a careful chain in motion. In a quiet office miles away, the chief of staff placed 3 calls in order. The first went to the internal unit that handles professional standards. The second went to the department's legal liaison. The third was to a confidential contact at the city's oversight office. He did not use alarm. He did not say names. He used titles, times, and one essential instruction: please ensure preservation of all digital logs beginning at Maple Street, time 14:04. He sent a short, formal email that repeated the same sentence. Emails create clocks. Clocks protect evidence. Inside the station, the sergeant returned to the body camera server room and asked the tech on duty about storage space. He suggested running a routine systems check. The tech looked uncertain. He had seen that phrase used correctly and incorrectly. He called up the status screen and saw Maya's fresh upload sitting in the queue with a locked tag preserve. The sergeant's face tightened. "We need to clear old files," he said. "This is slowing us down." The tech hesitated. "Policy says preserves can't be altered without authorization." The sergeant shrugged. "Then get authorization." He walked away, leaving the door ajar. Maya stepped into the doorway. She did not make a speech. She asked one question: "Did my upload complete?" The tech pointed at the green check. "Yes. And it's marked preserve." She nodded. "Thank you." She stepped back and sent one more message, this time to her own work email, with the upload confirmation attached. It was a tiny action, but it meant that one more time-stamped record existed outside the single server the sergeant hoped to influence. This was not defiance. It was care. It was the exact thing a policy manual begs good people to do. The sergeant and the first officer entered Daniel's room again with a typed statement. It claimed Daniel had been evasive, that he had raised his voice, that he had refused lawful orders, and that a strong scent had come from the car. Words that create smoke without fire. Daniel read the lines carefully. He placed the paper on the table and folded his hands. "These statements are not accurate," he said. "I will not sign them. I again ask for a lawyer and for a supervisor." The second officer shifted near the door, looking at the floor. The first officer's jaw tightened. Through the intercom, a different announcement arrived: "All personnel, briefing room in 10 minutes. The station's rhythm changed, footsteps sped a little. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment and pictured the diner owner holding her phone steady. He pictured the young delivery driver posting his short clip. He pictured Maya's camera light. Calm returned to him not as a trick, but as a choice. Calm is the shape of strength you can stand inside without raising your voice. In the lobby, the diner owner sat on a bench and waited for the promised supervisor. A man in a plain suit came through the side entrance and spoke with the desk officer in a quiet voice. He did not flash badges. He displayed a letter. He asked for a copy of all entries and exits for the evidence room since the time of the Maple Street stop. He asked that no digital maintenance occur until a review was complete. He wrote the time in his own notebook. He thanked the desk officer for his help. The desk officer, looking a little surprised, nodded with respect. Serious people were paying attention. Meanwhile, a short note appeared in the inbox of the city's oversight office: "Community video received Maple Street. Please preserve call log." The oversight clerk pinned it. She had seen ordinary cases and hard ones. What she did next was simple but powerful. She sent the preservation request to the station's general email and copied the city attorney's office. With that, the clock widened. When many clocks tick, truth gets louder. Back in the room, the sergeant pulled a chair closer to Daniel as if they were friends arranging a travel plan. "Look," he said, "you don't need trouble. We can make this a misunderstanding. You walk, we close the file. But you help us out." He did not say what help meant, and he didn't have to. The space around the word did the work. Daniel lifted his eyes to the ceiling camera once more and then back to the sergeant's careful smile. "I will not be part of any private arrangement," he said. "I am asking you to follow the rules." Maya stood in the hallway, listening to the cadence of voices through the door without placing her ear against it. She glanced down at her notepad and wrote a few more lines: time stamps, who entered, who left. She had wanted, when she joined, to be the kind of officer who made families feel safer when she arrived. That promise did not only exist on the sidewalk. It existed in rooms like this, in server closets, at desks with clipboards, in small choices no one applauds. She steadied herself with that thought. The intercom clicked. "Sergeant, brief in 2 minutes," said the calm voice. The sergeant rose with reluctant patience. "We'll be back," he said to Daniel, tapping the plastic evidence bag once more before picking it up. "Think about it." The first officer gathered the unsigned statement. The second officer lingered a heartbeat, then opened the door. As they left, Maya stepped aside to let them pass, then met Daniel's eyes for a brief, human second. She gave the smallest nod, not a promise, not a secret sign, just a steady line of contact that said, "I am watching the process. I am here." When the door closed, Daniel exhaled a slow breath. The room's camera kept its mute watch. Outside, the station moved toward a meeting that would collect facts and faces into one space. Across town, the hospital pager on the fourth floor chimed, and a nurse told Daniel's mother that visiting hours would resume in the evening. In the diner, customers spoke softly about the clip on their phones and refilled their coffee cups. In an office lit by a desk lamp, a clerk checked that the word preserve appeared in the subject line of every relevant email. The world did not stop for this moment. It simply began to notice it. Daniel rolled his shoulders slightly to ease the cuff's pressure and stared at the blank wall ahead. He was not thinking about rank or position. He was thinking about a simple idea he had taught young public servants for years: when people try to bend the process must bend back toward the truth. It doesn't shout. It doesn't stagger. It simply holds. He waited for the next door to open, for the next sentence to be spoken, for the next small, important choice to be made. The briefing room emptied the hallway for a few minutes, and the building grew oddly quiet. In the interview room, the ceiling camera kept its steady red dot, and the clock above the door ticked with a small click that felt louder than it should. Daniel sat straight in his chair and watched the door. He had waited long enough to let the system show itself who would follow rules, who would bend them, and who would protect the record. Now he measured the moment and chose the next careful step. The intercom crackled, and the same calm voice from earlier spoke again. "A duty lieutenant is on the way to confirm your status." The tone was neutral, almost administrative, but it carried weight. A minute later, the door opened. The man who walked in had gray at his temples and a notebook in his left hand. His badge read Lieutenant E. Quinn. He looked at Daniel, then at the camera, then at the empty chair on the far side of the table. He nodded once, a small gesture that said, "Let us be clear." "Sir," he began, "I'm Lieutenant Quinn. I am here to make sure our policy is followed. Are you requesting counsel? Are you asking to know your charges?" Daniel answered in the same even voice he had used since the stop. "Yes to both. I also request that all recordings, call logs, and evidence entries be preserved without alteration." He paused, then added, "Lieutenant, I am going to present federal identification to you now. I do this to ensure proper process, not to seek special treatment." Quinn's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. He moved the empty chair to one side so the camera had a clear line. "All right," he said. "If you present it, I will verify it on our line and document that step." Daniel nodded. With slow, announced motions, he reached for his wallet where it had been placed with his personal items, under the watch of the hallway officer. He set the closed wallet in the center of the table, opened it so it faced the camera, and removed a card and a small embossed credential case. The card carried his photograph and a name that changed the air in the room: Director Daniel Hart. He placed the credentials side by side, straightened them, and folded his hands. Quinn did not show surprise on his face. He looked at the card, then at the credentials seal, and then at the camera again. "I'm moving to verify," he said aloud. He stepped to the phone on the wall, dialed a number from a laminated sheet, and spoke simply. "Verification request. Local duty lieutenant. Credential number." He read the number. He provided the room number, the time, and his own badge. He listened. He wrote 2 lines in his notebook and repeated back a confirmation code. Then he hung up and returned to the table. "Your identification is confirmed," he said. "For the record, I will initiate preservation of all related materials. I will also call the chief." Daniel breathed once, steady and quiet. "Thank you," he said. "I ask that you apply the same protections as you would for any person. The truth should not depend on who someone is." Quinn nodded. "Understood." He turned to the camera and spoke clearly, so there would be no doubt later. "Effective now, all body-worn camera files, vehicle GPS logs, server access logs, interview room recordings, and evidence property entries linked to Maple Street stop at 1404 are to be preserved. No deletions. No edits. Chain of custody locks engaged." He clicked his pen shut. "I will make the calls." He opened the door. In the hallway, he found Officer Maya Ortiz standing at a slight angle as if guarding a line on the floor that others could not see. She had her notepad open. "Officer," Quinn said, "did you upload your body cam?" "Yes, sir," Maya answered. "It shows the entire stop from my arrival." "Good. I'm ordering a system lockdown on those files. I will need your handwritten timeline too." He glanced down the hall toward the staircase. "And stay on this. Do not shut that camera off unless policy requires it." "Yes, sir," she said, and the small light on her camera kept its steady glow. On the other side of the building, in the server room, the tech brought up the preservation screen. With Quinn's code and the confirmation number he had written down, the system switched to a read-only state for the relevant files. The words "chain lock engaged" appeared in a simple font. A log entry captured the time and user ID. These were small words in a small window, but they mattered like bolts in a bridge. The sergeant from earlier, returning from the briefing, stepped into the server room doorway and saw the screen. His mouth tightened. "We were doing a systems check," he said. The tech did not argue. "Lieutenant ordered preservation," he replied. "You'll need his authorization code for any maintenance." The sergeant left without answering. In the hall, he nearly bumped into Maya. "Why are you hovering around this?" he asked, trying to make his voice light. "I'm following the lieutenant's instruction," she said, meeting his eyes, her tone even. "We are preserving all materials." He opened his mouth to say something else, then stopped. He walked on. Maya wrote the time in her notebook and stepped back to the interview room door. In small places, quiet choices kept adding up. Lieutenant Quinn called the chief. The chief was at a charity luncheon across town, shaking hands with teachers and small business owners. He saw the lieutenant's name on his screen and stepped away from the chatter to answer. Quinn spoke in short, measured phrases: "Identification confirmed, preservation ordered, interview room camera rolling, policy steps underway." The chief listened. He felt the gravity at once. "I'm on my way," he said. Then he called the city's internal affairs captain and the legal advisor. He also called the oversight office, the one that had already sent the preservation note. "We will host you," he said to each. "Please come now." Across town, 2 federal observers received notice from the department that handles interagency coordination. The notice was not dramatic. It was a simple alert: potential misconduct during stop, identification of a protected official, request for quiet presence to support evidence protection. They arrived at the station through the back entrance with no lights, no sirens, and no cameras. They checked in at the front desk, presented letters, and asked to speak with the lieutenant. They did not take over. They did not raise voices. They did what they were trained to do: help a system keep its shape. In the interview room, Daniel watched the door. His hands were free now. Quinn had removed the cuffs after verification and documented that step on camera. Daniel flexed his fingers once to restore feeling. He thought of his mother waiting at the hospital and pictured her telling him, in her soft voice, "Do the right thing, and do it the right way. He smiled just a little at the memory and felt the room steady around him. The door opened again. Quinn re-entered, followed by one of the federal observers, a woman with a neat folder and a calm face. "Sir," Quinn said, "this is Miss Avery. She is here to support the preservation process. We're not here to ask you questions. We are here to make sure the record is complete." "Thank you," Daniel said. "Please make sure the bystander video is preserved too." A diner owner and a young delivery driver filmed the stop. "We have their contact information," Quinn replied. "They're in the lobby now." He glanced at Maya, who had appeared in the doorway again. "Officer Ortiz, can you escort our community witnesses to a quiet room and ensure they receive receipts for their video files? Document chain of custody." "Yes, sir." Maya's voice held a small warmth when she said community witnesses. It was a good term. It made people feel like part of the truth, not part of trouble. In a side office, the diner owner placed her phone on the table with careful hands, as if she were setting down a glass that might spill. The delivery driver sat beside her, helmet still by his feet. Maya explained how their files would be copied, time-stamped, and returned. She filled out 2 simple forms, one for evidence intake, one for witness contact. She wrote in clear, block letters so no one would guess later at what the words meant. She made sure they each received a printed receipt and a thank you card the department kept for such moments. It was a small thing, but it showed respect. Back at the server terminal, Miss Avery asked the tech for a printout of recent access attempts. The screen displayed a neat list: user IDs, times, actions. One line drew her eye: delete request initiated pending authorization denied by preservation lock. The time on that line matched the minute after Maya's upload finished. She did not comment. She simply circled the line on the printout and placed it in her folder. Facts speak when they are placed in the right order. The sergeant returned to the interview room with the first officer, carrying the same typed statement as before. He stopped in the doorway when he saw Daniel uncuffed and Miss Avery seated quietly with the lieutenant. "We're not done here," the sergeant said. Quinn stayed seated. "We are following policy," he replied. "This room is recorded. Any further questions will wait until counsel is present. In the meantime, you will provide me with your body cam footage and GPS logs. And you will not engage with the storage system without my authorization." The first officer shifted his feet. The sergeant's jaw set. "We had a lawful stop," he said, as if the words alone could make it so. "Then the footage will show that," Quinn answered. In the lobby, the chief arrived. He thanked the clerk who held the door, then went straight to the briefing room. His face was calm, but his steps were fast. He found Internal Affairs already there, along with the legal advisor and the oversight representative. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "We will proceed by the book. Lieutenant, please bring us up to speed." Quinn set a few pages on the table and walked them through the timeline: the stop, the lack of a clear reason, the request for a supervisor, the seizure of the phone, the absence of a labeled property entry, the typed statement with inaccurate claims, the identification presentation and verification, and the preservation actions. He passed around the server log printout with the denied deletion attempt. He also handed over Maya's handwritten timeline, which was neat, complete, and humble. It did not make speeches. It told times. Internal Affairs asked for the list of all personnel present during the stop and during the interview room period. The legal advisor requested copies of the receipts given to the community witnesses. The oversight representative asked to view the body cam footage in the presence of the group. The chief agreed. "We will watch it together," he said. "Then we will make decisions together." They dimmed the lights a little and played Maya's footage. The room became a window onto Maple Street. There were the trees casting shade across the curb. There was the silver rental car. There was Daniel's calm voice, "I request a supervisor." There were the questions that did not line up with the charge. There was the trunk opened without consent. There was the moment the phone went into a bag without a label. There was the diner owner's voice from across the street, "This is my business. This is my street." The video did not shout. It merely showed. When the clip ended, the room stayed quiet for a few seconds. The chief spoke first. His voice was steady, not harsh. "We will need statements from the involved officers," he said. "Under advisement and recorded. We will also need to secure the evidence room with a separate key control." "And the phone, where is the phone?" "In my custody," Quinn answered. "Bag number assigned. Chain started at 1513. He held up a receipt copy. "Good," the chief said. He looked at the oversight representative. "You will receive copies as allowed by law. We will be transparent." He looked at internal affairs. "You will lead the interviews, starting now." He looked at Maya. "Officer Ortiz, thank you for your careful work. Please remain available." Maya, who had entered the room quietly and taken the only chair by the wall, nodded once. She felt the weight shift in the building, not with noise, but with order. The chief asked to meet Daniel before anything else moved. In the interview room, he entered with Quinn and stood with his hands open at his sides. "Sir," he said to Daniel, "thank you for your patience. I am deeply sorry for what has happened here. We will act quickly and fairly." Daniel rose. He did not speak first. He waited for the camera's light to catch up, as if the room needed one heartbeat to write the scene into its memory. Then he said, "Chief, thank you for coming. Please make sure the truth is protected for the community, for your good officers, and for anyone who walks the street tomorrow. The badge is a promise." "It is," the chief said. He swallowed once. "It is." Quinn briefed Daniel on the next steps: a clean phone call, transport to a private room for safety while paperwork was corrected, and an escorted visit to his mother once the immediate process was secure. "We will document each step," he said. "If you choose to make a statement later, counsel will be present." Daniel nodded. "I appreciate the process," he said. He turned to Maya, who had stepped into the doorway again without drawing attention. "Officer Ortiz," he said, "thank you for your care." She did not blush. She did not make a speech. "Just following policy, sir," she said softly. In the server room, Miss Avery sent a short summary to her office: preservation in place, authorized locks engaged, attempted deletion denied by lock, community video secured. She closed her folder and looked once more at the plain screens that held the quiet weight of a city's trust. She thought, not for the first time, that good systems are like good bridges: most people never notice them until a heavy load crosses and the structure holds. The turning point did not arrive with a cheer or a headline. It arrived with pens clicking, with doors opening and closing, with time stamps lining up, with receipts handed to people who had stepped forward, and with a camera light that refused to blink off. In that ordinary, careful way, the day bent back toward the truth. And once it began to bend, it kept bending. The chief asked Internal Affairs to begin the formal interviews at once. The briefing room turned into a quiet stage for facts. Chairs were arranged in a simple line. A recorder sat in the center of the table, its small red light steady and bright. The legal advisor and the oversight representative took seats near the end, pencils ready, not to judge, but to keep the record clean. Lieutenant Quinn reviewed the order of steps in a calm voice so no one could later say they were confused. He explained that each person would be treated with respect, that no one would be rushed, and that all rights would be honored. The sergeant entered first with a union representative at his side. He raised his chin as if nothing had shifted. The first officer and the second officer followed a few minutes later, each with their own representatives. They had been advised of their rights and the process. No one spoke out of turn. The room held a simple, careful quiet that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Daniel did not sit at the table. He waited in the interview room down the hall, by choice, because he did not want the process to feel like a show. He wanted it to be work. They began by watching the body camera footage again, this time with the 3 officers present. The screen showed Maple Street with its shade trees and the blue diner awning. It showed Daniel's hands on the steering wheel and his steady voice asking for a supervisor. It showed the trunk opened despite his clear, calm refusal. It showed the phone placed in a bag without a label. It showed the diner owner speaking from across the street. The time-stamped log from the server appeared next, a printed sheet with a line circled, an attempted deletion request, denied by the preservation lock. The GPS map of the patrol cars followed, little dots tracing a clean trail. No one raised their voice. The facts did the talking. Internal Affairs asked the sergeant to explain the reason for the stop. He said the phrase he had used at the curb fit a description, but he could not give a case number or an incident time that matched the location. The investigator's questions remained steady and plain. What was your report number? Who gave the description? What was the specific offense you were investigating? The sergeant's answers slid away from details. He returned to feelings, looked suspicious, seemed evasive, but feelings are not policy. They do not place clean lines in a log. The first officer said. Daniel raised his voice and resisted. The video showed no such thing. It showed a measured tone and hands where they should be. The second officer said the phone was taken for safekeeping. The intake sheet showed no label and no time stamp at the curb, both required by the rules. The investigator did not argue. He only read the policy aloud, sentence by sentence, and then repeated his simple question: why was the intake not completed at the scene? The room grew very quiet. Maya was called next. She did not deliver a speech. She described what she saw and what she did. She noted the time she arrived, the moment she turned on her camera, and the words she heard from the diner owner. She explained that she uploaded her footage immediately, then sent a preserve notice, then checked the server status when she heard talk of a systems check. She presented her handwritten timeline. Her lines were clean. Her letters were clear. The oversight representative smiled a little at the neatness. Neatness is a kind of respect. The legal advisor asked if anyone had told Maya to alter her footage or suggested avoiding upload. She answered, no. The advisor asked if anyone had discouraged her from contacting Internal Affairs. She answered, no. The advisor asked if anyone had asked her to hand over her notepad. She answered, no. Then she added gently, I would not have, without a proper receipt. The chief thanked her for that small sentence. It was the kind of small sentence that tells a department what it wants to be. They called the tech from the server room to the table. He explained how the preservation lock works. Once engaged, no one can delete or edit files linked to the incident without high-level authorization and a recorded override. The printout showed that a deletion attempt had been made after Maya's upload. It showed the request came from a terminal that the sergeant had opened. The sergeant said he had only asked for a routine check. The tech nodded, not harsh, just exact. A routine check does not require a delete request, he said. It is a read-only action. He set the printout on the table like a final period at the end of a plain sentence. The oversight representative asked if any bystander videos had been collected. Lieutenant Quinn passed over 2 sealed media envelopes with receipt numbers written across the seams. He read those numbers aloud so the microphones could hear them. The diner owner's clip showed the first officer raising his voice while Daniel stayed calm. The delivery driver's clip showed the moment the phone was taken and the small glow of Maya's camera light. The clips matched the body camera footage like puzzle pieces joining at the edges. Consistency is its own kind of proof. The chief took a slow breath and looked down the table. He did not speak with anger. He spoke with duty. We will move forward with immediate suspensions for the sergeant and the 2 officers, pending arrest and charges, he said. He turned to Internal Affairs. Prepare the affidavits. He turned to the legal advisor. Coordinate with the district attorney for intake. He turned to the oversight representative. You will receive the files as the law allows. Our process will be open. Finally, he looked at Maya. Officer Ortiz, you will remain on duty and will be protected from any retaliation. If anyone pressures you, my office will be your next stop. The union representative spoke up, not to fight the process, but to ask that it proceed by the book. The chief agreed. By the book is what we are doing, he said. Everyone deserves that. He repeated, for the record, that the officers were presumed innocent and would have their day in court, and that the department's duty was to the truth. He said that more than once, because repetition matters when a city is listening. They moved to the holding rooms. The sergeant was asked to surrender his badge and sidearm. He hesitated for a second, as if a distant song had just changed, then placed them in the tray one by one. The first officer did the same. The second officer followed, slower, the shape of his hand lingering over the badge as if it could supply the words he had not said earlier. Each item received its own receipt, printed and signed. The chain of custody began in that small room with a table and a tray and a pen that did not skip. Daniel was invited to speak with the chief before the transfer. He stood in the doorway of the briefing room, the camera light visible behind him in the hall. The chief apologized again, not as a performance but as a promise. This will not be hidden, he said. We will not call it confusion. We will call it what the evidence shows. Daniel thanked him for the clear plan. He asked for 2 more things, that the department publish the policy steps they were taking, and that the community witnesses receive formal thanks. The chief agreed to both. He had a simple idea about trust: when you tell people the steps, they can count them with you. Internal Affairs escorted the 3 officers to a quiet side entrance where marked units waited to transport them for intake by an outside agency. There were no sirens. There was no parade. Plain work carried the day. The federal observers watched only to ensure that the chain of evidence stayed intact. They did not take control. They wrote down times and nodded when each step matched the plan. In the server room, the lock remained in place. In the lobby, the diner owner and the delivery driver signed their witness statements and took their own copies. The clerk thanked them and offered water. The delivery driver finally took off his helmet and smiled a little with relief. Before leaving the station, Daniel asked to see Maya in a quiet hallway away from the briefing room. He thanked her for doing the work as it should be done. He told her that following policy is not a small thing, even when it feels small. It is the road itself, not just the paint on the lines. She nodded and said she had learned that from a training officer who spoke softly and always wrote more notes than anyone else. They both smiled at that. He told her she had a future in leadership because leadership begins with care. The chief arranged for Daniel to make a clean phone call and provided a simple, secure room for a short rest. After a few minutes, Daniel asked if he could visit his mother as planned. The chief said yes, with a small escort for safety, and promised to document every minute so no one could later say special treatment hid the truth. The paperwork moved forward at the same time, neat and steady. The legal advisor drafted a public summary that named the policies at issue without adding dramatic language. Words matter. They should fit the moment exactly. A small crowd formed outside the station by late afternoon. There were no angry chants, only quiet faces and folded arms. People had watched the short online clip and wanted to know whether their city would shrink away from the hard part or step toward it. The chief came out to the steps and spoke in clear, short sentences. He said that a stop had occurred without a clear reason. He said that body camera and bystander videos were preserved. He said that 3 members of the department had been suspended and were under arrest for potential violations that included false arrest, attempted extortion, and tampering with evidence. He said that state and city oversight were involved. He said that more information would follow. He did not flatter himself or the batch. He spoke as a neighbor. Reporters asked for comment. The chief did not hide behind no comment. He gave the same facts he had just shared. He did not add opinions. He set a time for a longer press conference with the district attorney and the oversight office. He went back inside and went straight to the evidence room to examine the logbook. He ran a finger down the page, line by line, as if tracing the path of a day he would remember for the rest of his life. In the evening, Internal Affairs recorded formal statements from the 3 officers. The sergeant denied any intention to pressure Daniel and said his words had been misunderstood. The first officer said stress had affected his judgment. The second officer said he thought the phone intake could be completed at the station. The investigators wrote it all down. They did not argue. The court would sort these claims against the record. That is how a fair system behaves: it collects, it preserves, it checks, it does not rush to win. Maya finished her shift on the same steady line she had walked all day. She filed her final notes, checked the preserve flags one last time, and cleaned her camera lens as if she were polishing a small window. She could hear distant voices near the front desk, the sound of doors opening and closing, the click of the printer spitting out another receipt. She thought about why she became an officer. She wanted to help people feel safer when she arrived. She decided that today counted. Daniel stood outside the hospital a little later, the night air cooler on his face. He carried the white lilies that had waited in the rental car. A nurse greeted him with a kind smile and led him to his mother's room. He sat in the chair by her bed and told her the visit might be shorter than planned, but it would be peaceful. He held her hand and listened to the slow beeps of the monitor. The day had been long and heavy, but it had not been wasted. Systems had bent back toward the truth. Good people had stepped forward, not with banners, but with careful steps. Back at the station, the oversight representative finished a summary memo. It listed the preserved files, the times, the receipts, and the pending charges. It recommended body camera retention reforms, a clear rule for on-scene property labeling, and a protected pathway for officers to report concerns without fear. The memo did not scold. It offered a map. The chief read it at his desk before midnight and signed his name under a simple sentence: "We will do these things." The confrontation did not end with shouting. It ended with doors that opened at the right times, files that did not disappear, witnesses who were thanked, and a young officer whose cameras stayed on. It ended with a chief who put policy above pride, with a department that chose to be honest in front of its neighbors, and with a quiet man who asked only for the same fair treatment any person should receive. The city felt it in a small, strong way. Justice does not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives as a checklist, a log entry, a receipt, a calm voice, a lock that will not let go, and a promise kept in the light. Morning light touched the station with a soft gold that did not care about rank or rumor. Overnight, the building had stayed awake in its own quiet way: printers humming, servers blinking, a clerk refilling paper trays, the watch commander walking slow loops. By sunrise, the first formal notices were ready. The chief signed them in a steady hand. Internal Affairs filed the affidavits with the district attorney. The Oversight Office posted a short update so the public would not live on guesses. It named the steps, not the drama: preservation in place, 3 personnel suspended and under arrest, outside intake arranged, community videos secured, next briefing at noon. Daniel rose from the small room he had used to rest and stretched his hands. The cuffs had left no mark, but the day before had left a weight he could still feel. He washed his face, thanked the officer at the door, and asked to speak with the chief. They met in the hallway near the evidence room, where a laminated card now hung on the wall with big letters: Property must be labeled at scene. The card had always been in the manual, now it was on the wall. I'm grateful for your work, Daniel said. More important, I am grateful for the work your people did, the ones who followed the rules when it would have been easier not to. The chief nodded. He looked tired and clear-eyed at the same time. Our job now is to keep faith with the process, he said. No shortcuts. No theater. They walked to the small conference room where the oversight representative and the legal advisor waited. A whiteboard listed the day's tasks. None of the lines sounded grand, and that was exactly right. Witness thank you letters and receipts delivered, body cam retention policy bulletin posted in lobby and online, supervisor on scene rule, 10-minute response standard, with tracking, anonymous reporting channel for officers protected and monitored, bystander video intake, desk sign and QR code, live by noon training case, Maple Street procedure review scheduled for all shifts. They reviewed each line without rushing. The oversight representative suggested adding a simple online page where any resident could see the policy steps and the dates they were completed. The legal advisor suggested a monthly open report with numbers on stops, searches, and complaints, so people could watch the city measure itself. The chief wrote both ideas on the board and underlined them. At noon, the press conference began on the station steps. There were more cameras now, and more neighbors, 2 parents with strollers, a teacher on her lunch break, a delivery driver who had finished his route and come to listen. The chief did not bring a long speech. He brought a timeline. He walked through it like stones across a creek, step by careful step, the stop on Maple Street, the request for a supervisor, the seizure of the phone without a label, the body cam upload, the preservation lock, the attempted deletion denied by that lock, the identification verification, the arrests, the reforms already in motion. He named the policies by number and plain title. He kept his voice even. He did not use sharp words. He used clear ones. The district attorney spoke next. She explained, in simple language, that charges had been filed: false arrest, attempted coercion, and evidence tampering. She said every defendant had rights, that the court would weigh the record, and that the public would see the process as it unfolded. She stressed that the case was about specific actions by specific people, not a judgment on everyone who wore a uniform. A few reporters tried to pull her into big talk. She did not step into it. She kept her footing on the timeline. Then the oversight representative took the microphone and held up a small card. This is our new way to receive bystander video and witness statements, she said. There is a QR code. There is also a desk inside for anyone who prefers paper. If you film something that matters, we will treat you with respect and give you a receipt. You are part of the truth, and the truth needs you. People murmured their approval in that quiet way that carries farther than applause. Daniel stood at the edge of the crowd with a cap pulled low. He did not want the day to orbit around his title. He wanted it to orbit around the rules that keep ordinary people safe. When the questions ended, the chief invited him to say a few words. Daniel walked up, eyes soft, hands open. Most officers serve with honor, he said. The badge is a promise to protect, and many keep that promise every day in ways we never see. But when someone breaks the rules, we must answer with rules, not with anger alone. Procedures are how truth travels from a curb to a courtroom without getting lost. Yesterday, some people tried to bend the process. Other people inside this building and outside it held the line. That is what matters. We will let the courts do their work, and we will keep improving the path that the truth must walk. He stepped back. There were no cheers, just a few nods and a quiet yes from somewhere near the back. That sounded right. In the afternoon, the city held an open forum in the community center gym. Folding chairs made neat rows under a high ceiling that smelled faintly of fresh varnish. A big sign read, "Listen. Learn. Fix." The chief, the oversight representative, and the legal advisor sat on the stage with microphones that squeaked now and then. There was no barrier between them and the crowd, only space. People lined up to speak, a grandmother who walked her grandson to school every morning, a small business owner who swept his sidewalk at dawn, a high school teacher who taught civics and wanted his students to see what accountability looked like in real life. A few people spoke with heat. The heat was not aimed like a weapon, it was a weather report about the past. The chief did not argue. He took notes. When a father worried aloud about his teenage son driving at night, the chief said, "Your worry is heard. Here is what will change." He pointed to the new supervisor response standard. He explained the tracking sheet anyone could view. He explained the difference between a lawful search and a search that would now trigger automatic review. The room did not cool, but it steadied. The diner owner spoke near the end. She was not used to microphones, so she held hers a little too close. "I filmed because it felt wrong," she said simply. "I stayed because I love my street. Thank you for the receipt. It meant you saw me." The room clapped, soft and grateful. The delivery driver, helmet under his arm, followed. "I posted because I had questions. Thank you for answering with steps." In a smaller room down the hall, a short ceremony took place without cameras. The chief handed Maya a commendation for adherence to policy under pressure. It was a rectangle of paper in a plain frame, but it meant the department was telling the right story about the kind of officer it hopes to grow. Daniel shook Maya's hand. "There is a fellowship I run for young leaders who keep their compass even in small rooms," he said. "If you want it, a slot is yours." Maya smiled, surprised and steady. "I want to keep learning," she said. "I want to be useful." Daniel answered, "That is the heart of leadership." That evening, Daniel finally reached the hospital again with the white lilies. A nurse at the desk recognized him from the news but pretended not to. She simply smiled and said his mother was awake and had asked for him. He walked into the room and the world got small, in the best way. His mother's eyes were bright. "You are late," she teased, with the exact softness he had hoped to hear. He laughed, set the flowers by the window, and told her everything, not about titles, but about people: the diner owner who stood her ground with a phone and a steady voice, the delivery driver who posted a question instead of a shout, the tech who guarded a server with quiet stubbornness, the lieutenant who spoke to the camera like a notary for the city, the chief who chose policy over pride, and the rookie whose camera light did not blink. His mother listened and squeezed his hand. "Keep doing it the right way," she said. "Kind is not weak. Firm is not cruel. Tell the truth and guard the doors that keep it safe." Over the next days, the city kept its promise to show its work. The department's website added a public page with 5 boxes that turned green as each item was done: bystander intake desk live, supervisor response standard in effect, body cam retention revised and posted, anonymous officer reporting open, monthly stop data first report published. Each box linked to a PDF written in simple words. People could read the steps and see the dates. It was not flashy. It was trust you could scroll. In roll call rooms across the city, sergeants ran the Maple Street case as a training. They did not turn it into a scolding. They turned it into a checklist. Young officers practiced saying, "I hear you, and I am calling a supervisor now." They practiced labeling property on scene with a pen that did not skip. They practiced standing still with a camera running and letting calm be the strongest tool in the room. Some rolled their eyes at first, as people do when told to practice basics. By the end, most nodded. Basics save days. The case against the 3 officers moved forward in court, where every claim would be tested and every log would be read under careful light. The city did not celebrate. It stayed patient. It let the timeline keep doing its plain work. The oversight office kept posting updates when the law allowed. Internal affairs met its deadlines and stopped using vague phrases. Words got cleaner. That is also a kind of reform. Daniel wrote 2 handwritten notes on his last morning in town, one to the diner owner and one to the delivery driver. He thanked them for stepping forward with steady hands. He told them their receipts were more than paper, they were proof that the door is open for neighbors who care about their street. He left the notes at the cafe under the blue awning. The owner tucked hers near the register and smiled each time she saw it. The driver taped his near his desk at home and told himself to keep watching with a fair eye. On Maple Street, cars still parked under the shade trees. People still waved to the mail carrier. The station's wall poster still said property must be labeled at scene, and now there was another beside it, supervisor request. Call immediately. Clock starts now. A copy hung in the lobby where anyone could point a finger at it if they needed to. The badge on each belt looked the same as yesterday, but the promise wrapped around it felt more visible, like a thread pulled tight and checked for strength. On his way out of town, Daniel stopped at a lookout where the road rose and the city lay small in the distance. He thought about quiet systems and the people who choose to hold them upright. He thought about how truth moves best when carried by many hands: an officer with a camera, a clerk with a receipt, a witness with a phone, a chief with a list, a mother with a simple sentence. He turned the rental car key and smiled at the lilies in the hospital window, at the blue diner awning, at a little red record light that refused to blink off, and at a city trying, not to be perfect, but to be honest and steady. The lesson of the week could fit on a single line: real power is doing the right thing when no one is watching and building a path that lets the truth walk safely from the street to the light. In this city, that path had been tested. It held. And because it held, people could rest a little easier, knowing that if someone tried to bend the rules tomorrow, the rules would bend back.